In the realm of Asgard, Thor, the mighty god of thunder, was both respected and feared. But there was one thing that even he held dear above all else: his daughter, Þrúðr. One day, a proud dwarf named Alvíss, renowned throughout the 9 realms for his incredible knowledge, came seeking her hand in marriage. Alvíss, whose name meant all-wise, had long been admired for his wisdom, and the gods had promised him Þrúðr's hand. But Thor, ever protective of his daughter, was not entirely convinced by the dwarf's wisdom. He had heard of Alviss's boastful nature and was suspicious of his true intentions. Thor decided that the only way to test the dwarf's knowledge and perhaps prevent the marriage was to challenge him with a test of wits. Alvíss stood confidently before Thor, ready to claim the prize he had long sought. "I have come for what is rightfully mine, Thor," he declared. "I seek no more than the hand of your daughter, Þrúðr, as promised." But Thor, with a glint of mischief in his eyes, smiled and responded, "Very well, Alvíss. But before you take her, you must prove your wisdom to me. I will ask you questions about the world and the 9 realms. Answer them correctly, and I will give my blessing. Fail, and you will leave empty-handed." Alvíss, undeterred by Thor's challenge, accepted with confidence. "I will answer all your questions, Thor. There is nothing I do not know." With that, Thor began the test. "What is the name for the land that stretches around all the worlds?" Thor asked, his voice deep and commanding. Alvíss did not hesitate. "Men call it Earth, but the Aesir call it Field, and the Vanir call it the Ways. The giants call it Evergreen, and the elves call it Grower," he answered, naming the different names each race used for the same land. Thor nodded, impressed by the dwarf's knowledge. "And what is the name of the sky?" "The sky is called Sky by men, and heaven by the gods," Alvíss replied swiftly, his eyes gleaming with certainty. Thor smiled a bit, but his challenge wasn't over. He continued, asking Alvíss about the sun, the moon, the sea, the fire, and all manner of things in the 9 realms. With each question, Alvíss provided detailed answers, naming the various kennings and poetic descriptions each race used for the elements of the world. As the night deepened, Thor's questions grew more complex and philosophical, testing the depth of Alviss's knowledge. Alvíss, proud of his wisdom, answered each question without hesitation, even as the hours passed. But Thor had been planning this for some time. He knew something Alvíss didn't. Dwarfs, being creatures of darkness, were sensitive to sunlight. If Alvíss was exposed to the first rays of dawn, he would turn to stone. Unbeknownst to the dwarf, Thor had continued the challenge deliberately, leading it into the early morning hours. Alvíss, engrossed in the conversation and confident in his ability to answer anything, failed to notice the subtle shift in the air, the first signs of dawn. As the conversation continued, Thor's voice grew louder, and his questions more intricate, pushing Alvíss to reveal everything he knew about the realms. The dwarf answered each one, describing everything from the names of trees to the gods' realms to the movement of the stars. But then, the sun began to rise. The soft light of dawn crept over the horizon, and Alvíss, still caught up in his answers, did not notice the dangerous change. His body began to stiffen, his eyes slowly widened in realization, but it was too late. Thor's voice rang out triumphantly. "You have answered well, but in your pride, you have failed to see the light of day. The sun now rises, and with it, you are turned to stone." The dwarf Alviss's face contorted in terror as the truth struck him. He attempted to move, to speak, but his body betrayed him. His limbs grew rigid, his mouth froze in a silent scream, and his eyes, once filled with boundless wisdom, now widened in shock and disbelief. "By your own wisdom, Alvíss, you have sealed your fate," Thor's voice rang out, cold and unforgiving. "You may possess knowledge of all the realms, but you failed to grasp the one truth even the wisest must face. No one can defy the rising sun." The dwarf's body began to harden, his once vibrant features slowly turning to stone. His knowledge, once his greatest asset, had become his ultimate downfall. Alvíss, the all-wise, was now nothing more than a lifeless statue, frozen forever in time. Thor stood over the statue of Alvíss, his heart heavy with mixed emotions. The victory was his, but it had come at a cost. He had saved his daughter from a marriage he did not approve of, but in doing so, he had condemned a proud being to a fate worse than death. Yet Thor knew it was for the best. Þrúðr would not marry a dwarf whose pride had led him to ignore the most fundamental rule of the world. The light of day would always rise, and no matter how wise one might be, it was impossible to escape that truth. "Rest now, all-wise Alvíss," Thor muttered, his voice softer now. "Your wisdom will never be forgotten, but it was your own arrogance that turned you to stone." The sun rose higher in the sky, and the light bathed Asgard in warmth. The gods who had gathered in the hall witnessed the transformation, and many of them spoke in hushed tones, reflecting on the fate of Alvíss. His fate was a reminder to all. No matter how wise or knowledgeable one may be, humility must always temper wisdom. Þrúðr, upon hearing the news of her suitor's demise, felt a mixture of sorrow and relief. She knew her father had acted out of love and protection, but the loss of Alvíss was a bitter one. She would never marry the dwarf, but she would remember his wisdom. And so, Alviss's name lived on, not as a suitor for Þrúðr, but as a cautionary tale for all who would challenge the wisdom of the gods. The statue of Alvíss remained in the halls of Asgard, a silent monument to the dangers of pride and the importance of respecting the forces that govern the world. Thor's trick, though harsh, had ensured that the balance of the realms was maintained, yet in the end, it was not Alviss's wisdom that would be remembered most. It was the way his wisdom failed him in the end, turning him into nothing more than a stone statue, forever frozen in time.